Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to Gather for Her. We are live here on Facebook and on LinkedIn. I am grateful to be here with my woven braided sisters from Powerhouse Impact Media Group. We are a co-created conversation with changemakers, talking about the world that we are building collectively together. I'm going to pass over to my braid sister, Charlene Sanjanko, the founder of Powerhouse, and pull us in our welcome this morning. Thank you, Char.
Thanks, T. Good morning. Good morning. I just invite you to take a nice deep breath. Bring your energy in for however long you can join us for this time. And you are so welcome to join us every Wednesday morning as we gather. And as we have gathered for over 50 consecutive weeks. I want to let you know that Gather for Her is a socially based collective conversation. It's a cumulative conversation that unfolds as we chat with local to global changemakers. And it is a streamed podcast series. Very excited to welcome you today and to host you from my home to your home. I acknowledge that Powerhouse lives, works, and plays on the Squamish First Nations land, the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory. And this morning, I send love, healing, and prayers to the families in Williams Lake. And I just gather energy and send it that way as well. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to pass to Christina.
Oh, thank you, Charlene. Good morning and welcome, everyone. We're so pleased that you're here, and all of you is welcome. My name is Christina Benty, and I'm joining you today from Golden, BC, which is also the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and the Shuswap peoples and the Columbia River Métis. And like Charlene said, this is a co-creative, generative conversation, and there's always learning and wisdom that is shared and learning that takes place. My life is always different and more expansive after these conversations. So I'm very excited to be speaking with Miah today. But I want to introduce and pass it over to my sister, Sharon, and have you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Christina. And welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with everybody today and have this conversation with somebody who's near and dear to my heart, Miah. My name is Sharon Marshall, and I am Métis Cree from Treaty 4 territory in Edmonton. And I am coming to you today from the traditional and ancestral territories of the Snuneymuxw and Snuneymuxw First Nations of the Coast Salish people. And in particular, I am here in Lanceville, so I'm between both Nanaimo and Snuneymuxw. And I'm super excited to be here, and I think I will just pass it right back to you, Tina, or Char.
I'm gonna grab the mic for just a sec because I was like busy setting up the room, and I didn't say hello from my heart. So I want to welcome you all. I'm Tina O. I am part of the braid, and I am a story listener. I'm grateful to be here from Naquelaquam, also known as Bowen Island, floating on the beautiful Coast Salish Sea. Grateful to be on the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish people, and their story walks. I walk with their story. So thank you. And now I'll pass over to you, Char.
Well, it's my pleasure to deep dive into this conversation. I invite all of you, listening with two eyes and two ears and more, but listening with your whole self. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guest today. I want to tell you just a little bit about Miah Olmsted. She is a founding member of both Zebras Unite and Impact Arts Co-op. Miah is a friend, a supporter, a colleague, a visionary. She works with artists, makers, builders, scientists, investors, venture philanthropists, the underrepresented and underbanked entrepreneurs. And together, They maximize social, cultural, environmental, and economic impact to make our world a healthier, happier, more interesting place. Powerhouse is so excited to be on this journey with Miah, her team, and her colleagues. And today we're going to chat with a data-driven storyteller, a grandmother, a mother, a scuba diver, an artist, a creator who enjoys the twin joys of curiosity and courage. There's so much more that I could tell you, but this story is just waiting to unfold. So without further ado, welcome, Miah.
Thank you. That was quite the introduction. So I feel like my doppelganger needs to be over here. Oh, that's you, right? I'm very, very proud to be here with my sisters and my partners and my, I think, formerly joint venture associates, but mostly I'm just really proud to be in this room with such change makers and storytellers and heart sisters. I am coming myself from the traditional lands of the Siilks Okanagan peoples, and I am a Jewish settler who is very grateful every day to have the opportunity to hike, to bike, to swim, to sing, to laugh in these lands that have been protected since time immemorial. So I just wanted to do a big shout out there as well.
I would love to kick off this conversation if you would allow me. I had a conversation the other day, and I specifically was talking about fire in the belly change making. Fire in the belly change making. And I would wonder, Miah, if you could reflect and what comes up for all of us. But from your perspective as a data-driven storyteller, at this age and stage of your life, Miah, you could do anything you want to. And I believe you are. So what at this age and stage in your life is calling you so loudly with that fire in the belly change making that has you doing what you're doing now? And I would just want to open that up to you. At this point in 2022 of your lifetime? I'm curious, really curious.
Well, number one, I am really lucky and privileged. I'm standing on the shoulders of incredible women who came before me. I'd like to give a big shout out to my mom, who had surgery this morning and is being courageous in her own way. I'd like to give a big shout out to my stepmother, who was formative in my years, and a big shout out to my high school biology teacher, who was also incredibly influential in my life. But one of the strongest relationships that I had that was with my mother-in-law, God rest her soul. And she said very clearly along the way, you can't do everything in life. I'm sorry, you can do everything in life. You just can't do it at the same time. So I hoarded ideas and hoarded dreams and hoarded things that I wanted to work on until the time was right, sort of like putting wishes in a jar. And when I started working on it, I recognized the feeling that she had always said to the grandkids, which is, do the thing that makes your toes twinkle in the mornings when you get up. And when my toes started to twinkle, I thought, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm an unusual person, and I think that I'm relatively strong in the skill of being able to build bridges. And so I think that understanding that about myself has helped me turn things that in the past might have been negative characteristics. And certainly they were things that I was really hard on myself about. And now I celebrate them and I use them to benefit other people and make the world a better place. So I think that the change making is about changing my own identity and then helping to be a part of helping others change their identity, because the world is just chaotic right now, and it's requiring all of us to sort of re-examine who we are and where we sit and what's important, what we want to work on.
Oh, Thank you for that, Miah. So not only do your toes twinkle, you twinkle. I had the privilege of meeting Miah a couple months ago in person, and I'm like, most people call me the Energizer Bunny, and I'm like, oh no, I can't even hold a candle to Miah. She really is the Energizer Bunny, and I appreciate how you show up in the world. And I want to go back to the using data to tell stories, right? Because that's stories are how we communicate, and data is how we build out the story for change making. So I want to hear more from you about how do you use data in terms of and in storytelling. It's so much a big part of my work in the world, and so I want to hear from you how you do that.
Okay. Well, first off, I think we should all recognize that we are all data driven in all kinds of ways. We look at the temperature of the weather. We look at whether it's going to rain or not. We teach our kids how to make cookies when they're toddlers. We have shoe sizes and clothing sizes. And we live in a world where measurements matter. And the measurements that we keep close to our heart are the data-driven measurements that matter to me when we're telling stories. So these are the measurements that say, I want to make sure that 7 generations from now, somebody says, oh my God, I'm really glad she was my ancestor. So that means that in this time, if that's who I want to be 7 generations from now, then I think, what actions do I need to take now so that my descendants later are proud? And we live right now in a data-driven world. And if I want to be the change maker in this world right now to influence this space later on, then I have to work with what I've got. And I'm not an amazing mathematician. I am not an amazing artist. I am not an amazing storyteller, but I'm fairly good at all 3. And when I combine them, then that allows me to take advantage of this energy. For me, data-driven storytelling is everything from understanding the data that's missing when we're trying to talk about people's experiences. It's about lifting up the voices that are critical if we really want to build a truly sustainable world. If we want to make sure that we're living in a world that is socially just, environmentally just, economically just, we have to look at the numbers. And that doesn't mean that we have to obsess about the numbers, but we do need to check on them every now and then. And I think it's more enjoyable to check on them through the arts.
Okay, I'm coming in. But first, if you're just joining us, you have just dropped into a co-created conversation called Gather for Her. We've been meeting for the last 50 weeks. All started when the pandemic first was introduced to our lives and we were all stuck at home. And we have co-created conversations with changemakers. You can join our audience because next week we will be gathering again, but privately, to unpack all the ideas in here in our wisdom circles. You can see that link below. All right. So here's where this is what I'm jumping with. I love story, as we know. And I want to call out in a lovingly way. You said, I'm not an amazing storyteller, and I'm not an amazing this, and I'm not an amazing that. And I want to remind all of our listeners that storytelling as an oral tradition was never about performance. It was never about amazing. It was never about that. And I say that for all of us. I get nervous as soon as my camera comes on. And yet story, just as Christina said, is the connective tissue of our relational understanding. And I would love to, I love the word amazing, but it sure would be great to ditch it sometimes, Jeepers. So I wanted to drop that in, but I wanted to also ask you, or I'm not even sure what the question is, Miah. I love, and yet my brain fries when I try to understand the mix that you are, which is this science and art piece. And what came up for me when you were talking about data was in story, symbols are often the data. And I don't even know where to go with this, but I really appreciate what you said about data that's missing. And I'm just going to open them and go, where does that take you? Maybe tell me more about data that's missing and symbols. See what happens.
Well, how about if I give you a story from someone on my team? Is that okay? Because we like stories. So I want to give a lot of credit to Sheila Patakin and Natasha Moccasin. They've really taught me a lot about storytelling. And one day we were having a conversation and they also didn't understand this idea about data-driven storytelling. So I said, well, can you think of a time where somebody has asked you some questions and they've been writing the information down because what they were asking you would impact a decision that would be made? And so the description of a powwow came up. Now, I don't come from a culture of powwow, but it was really fascinating to me and felt like a very privileged space for me to listen to the story. And what they were saying is that when you go into the powwow, the dancers are counted. You have to pre-register in order to have the dancers there to organize it. And then people who are serving refreshments or water or things like this, these are all measured in some way, a timed entrance, a timed exit, when are they going to need electricity, things like that. So I said, all right, well, I said, why do you think this is really important? And they said, well, the powwows are getting bigger. And as we are really revitalizing our culture, then more people are coming. And I said, all right. I said, well, then you've got a data-driven story. And they didn't understand. So I said, well, I just want you to imagine that you are a grandmother, right? So just close your eyes and imagine that you are years in the future and you're old and you're wizened. And the most helpful thing you can do in the world is just to hold your great grandbaby. And so you just rock in your chair and you're just smelling the loveliness of a new baby. And some of the other little children come around and they say, oh, the powwow's going to start. Powwow's going to start. And you say, oh, you kids, you don't even know. Oh my goodness gracious. I remember right at that time that COVID was coming along and the powwows, they were getting bigger and that they were getting bigger and more people were coming and we just needed to find land. We needed to reclaim our land to put some more space for dancing, for joy, for living. And it was a good thing that those two women really taught us to think about how we needed to count and how we needed to measure to make sure that we could celebrate the full glory of our people. When you finish a story like that, you want to know, what did they count? What did they measure? Where did it go? What did they do with it? You're curious. Stories are soothing. Stories inspire behavioral change. Stories inspire motivation. Stories inspire curiosity and stories inspire courage.
So the data is like at least how I'm receiving it, the data is the catalyst for the curiosity.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Miah.
The data can be different too. Like Tina and I talked about this a couple of months ago, that if we're moving into a net zero world, this means that we have a lot of responsibility to honor people who've spent a huge amount of their time doing really hard jobs. Coal mining is not an easy job. Working on an oil rig offshore is not an easy job. Working to lay pipes, these are not easy jobs. So if we're going to move into a new world with new jobs, then one of the things that we have to do is we have to take care of the people who've provided energy for us up to this point. And one of the ways we have to take care is that we've got to really help somebody understand that the job that they had, that they took such pride from, that was their identity, that it's changing, and that their new identity is also something to be proud of. And it's not that we're saying this was a bad identity, or that we're ashamed. No, we're not. We're not at all. But we recognize that we need to live in harmony with the land in a different way. And we need to be celebrating the opportunity that we have to still preserve the beauty that we have, and then to rebuild things that are even more beautiful, right? Plant more trees and create more protected watersheds, these kinds of things. So I think that data also helps you to change your identity if it's presented through the arts, because the arts allow you to feel the loss of the old identity, and they allow you to celebrate bringing on your new identity, and they allow you to explore the full range of human emotions, hundreds of human emotions. That's what we need the arts for, is to be able to be fully present, fully alive in our humanity.
I want to pass to you, Sharon. I'm just wondering I could feel it.
Yeah, I had something else that I wanted to talk to, but that story got me, and I lost my train of thought. So I'm sure it'll come back. But that was an amazing story, Miah. And something you had said earlier was it's important to check on the numbers. But I think you do more than that. You do more than just check on the numbers. Those numbers mean a lot to you. And from what I know of you, the arts bring those numbers. They give the numbers more meaning to a larger group of people. It's not just data. It is. It is data, but it when you say data, it's like, oh, people just like their eyes roll and like, I don't want to hear it, right? For a lot of people, unless they're data scientists or that sort of folk. But one of the stories that you had mentioned to me earlier is, I'd love for you to just talk about that a little bit, and that is of how you see data telling or data storytelling for the 21st and 22nd century, 21st century, with AI and all that is possible. And I think you know the story that I'm referring to. Okay, awesome.
I think so, but if I don't, you can certainly correct me.
Grandfather and
we now live in a world where public businesses and private businesses prepare annual reports. Now they're starting to prepare these impact reports. And I don't know how many people who are watching this call have actually looked at one of these 78-page reports. They have these beautiful graphs, and just they're, the design capabilities now are gorgeous. But the information is still printed in the size 12 font for 78 pages long. It's really not exactly the most interesting. And so frankly, most of us read the executive summary, which is usually 2 or 3 pages, and then we push it off to the side. So all this incredible work that's been done, especially if it's been done really well, where somebody's really gone out into the field and interviewed everyone, gets just kind of shoved off to the side, because people really only pay attention to the numbers, the financials. But there's so much more to measuring impact than the financials. One of the things that we're looking at is exploring how we can use extended reality, which extended reality is everything from VR to augmented reality. It's that whole range of these emerging technologies. And so one of the things that we've been really looking at is, how do you help people walk in the shoes of other people? So recently, for an example, the staff attended a building an empathetic culture workshop with zebras that was hosted in part by the Emotions Playground Lab at Harvard. that allowed everyone to actually go through simulations of what it was like to walk in the shoes of someone when they were experiencing racism or some sort of homophobia or some sort of issue that maybe you don't understand unless you've walked in those shoes, right? Another example is a woman in North Carolina who's been working with the Coded Bias team. And if you haven't seen that film, I tell anybody and everybody, it's on Netflix. I encourage you to watch it. It's called Coded Bias. But there's a team in North Carolina that actually has a VR headset and is helping people to understand, for an example, what it's like to be a young Black boy, and then what it's like to be a teenage Black boy, and then what it's like to be a Black boy in college, and then what it's like to be a young Black man, and then what it's like to be a Black man 40 years into his career. And to actually live through that vignette of understanding how these tiny little, what seemingly small microaggressions, how those can accumulate over the course of a lifetime and break you down. And then magnify that by lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And now you've got intergenerational trauma. Now, one of the things that I'm really focused on in the next couple of years is being able to work with young people between the ages of 16 and 30, what they call the digital natives, to understand how we might revitalize the art of oral storytelling, but combine it with some of the gamification and the use of video and the use of augmented reality. So that, for an example, you've got this incredibly boring report, but then what happens if augmented reality, a little hologram of an elder pops up and explains to you why that graph is important and whose lives will be changed or whose lives were changed as a result of those numbers that you're looking at, right? We now use QR codes on a regular basis. What if you could just scan that QR code and have the story come alive for you? What about if you're in a classroom? So for an example, there are numerous films now that are releasing educational packs with the films. And one of the things that you can do with the little teeny tiny Google Cardboard headset, the little pseudo VR glasses that are like $15, I mean, super cheap, you can actually have the kids walk around in the classroom as though they're in an environment. So I've seen it done a lot around diving, where kids can walk around and there's a shark in their classroom, or there's a coral reef, and, you know, of course, depending on the age, they're all screaming out, Nemo! I've seen Nemo!
Nemo.
Right, but they found him. He's there in the classroom. So it's very, very exciting. But I think it's no less exciting for adults who, we like to laugh, we like to play, and we like to hear someone tell us about their lived experience themselves, right? Nobody wants to hear some middle-aged white lady talking about their lived experience. They would much rather hear it from the person who lived through it, because that person, number one, it's their right to tell their own story. Number two, they usually tell it better. And number three, they're available for questions after the story. So it's only logical that you would want to make sure that these stories are being told by people who've had those lived experiences, not the person who gathered the data and then collated the data and then put it into a fancy graph. That's not to say we don't need those graphs. It's just to say we really need the storytellers.
I'm going to pass to Christina in just a sec, because there's stuff burbling in that. I can see it in your eyes. But before we do, I just thought, if you're just joining us, because we're live on social here on Facebook and on LinkedIn, if you're just joining us, welcome to Gather for Her. You're just entered a co-created conversation with the Braid of Powerhouse Impact Media Group. And today you are listening to the fabulous Miah Olmsted of Impact Arts Co-op. We will be unpacking this conversation in a private wisdom circle next week. So if you want to be in on that wisdom circle, make sure you register and join our audience. I want to pass to you, Christina, around all whatever's up. You know, I always think of Christina as an energetic, and a systems. Like, somehow you two are like, I'd love to go for a walk with the two of you and be totally, utterly confused. Over to you, Christina.
Well, my little brain's on fire right now, of course, because So I'll tell you what I'm thinking about. I'll think out loud and then kind of toss it over to you, Miah, and see if you have any. I'd be curious to know where this takes you. But you are so bang on when you talk about how organizations and government and the systems that we operate in, how they there's almost the worship of data put in long, lengthy reports, and the failure to connect it to the stories and to the impact. So I work with a number of nonprofit organizations that are impacting people's lives on a daily basis. So just like you, you're doing that in your work, and I'm working with these organizations, and they have these reporting requirements, right, from their funders. And the reporting requirements are about the numbers. And what I want to see is, how do we connect the numbers to the stories, and how can we create how do we get the system, so the government, the funders, to actually to be curious about the stories? Because the impact isn't, oh, here's how many people that have viewed your video or come in your doors. It's actually, how have their lives changed? How are their lives better? How are their lives different? And this is the change making. So even though government wants to fund change making projects, they don't know how to capture the data to tell the stories. And so what I'm curious about is, how do we weave those things together to really start to share the impact of real change making on people's lives? And it's about building, like, I loved what you talk about, using scenarios to create visceral experiences that change people's lives. Oh, now I get it, right? My eyes are opened. Now I see. And so I'm curious to where that takes you. Because like I said, I like the idea of pushing back on funders and going, here's the stories,
Yeah, it's I think fundamentally you and I get along so well because we're both systems thinker, right? And so we are very focused around trying to break down silos. And I have found that the best way to break down silos in my life is just to ignore them, which usually I can't play by the rules over here, so I'm just going to go over here and make my own game because this game is not working for me. Like I can't be as successful, as charged up, as happy, as filled with joy, as impactful as I would like to be if I have to play inside of these rules. So I'm just going to go over here, and I have to give my kids lots and lots of credit for this, right? Because they're all huge game players. They will try any board game at least once, twice if another friend has told them that it's a good game. And they flex, right? They just flow from game to game to game to game to game to game to game. So they change the rules all the time. They're aware of this. They've got no problem with adapting quickly to different sets of rules. And I found that really fascinating as they were growing up. And then when they sort of came of age, and anybody who has children in their 20s and 30s, ours are aged 30 to 37, they have got no problem putting you in your place. This is what you are doing wrong. Now I am old enough and strong enough to tell you, to call you out on this. So my kids do. And I'm really lucky about that, right? I'm really, really lucky for that. But as a result, then what it's caused me to do is to approach everything with curiosity. And when you approach things with curiosity, the first thing you figure out is that door is closed. Why is that door closed? How come I can't go in that door? How come they can go in the door, but I can't? So then you go, fine, I don't need to go in that door. I'm just going to go over here and build my own house. And I'm going to make sure that that house has an open door. So because I don't want other people to feel the way that I felt. Right? So the only way to create that house and make sure that that house is stable and warm and comfortable is to make sure that everybody who might live in that house, whether they live there for a meal and sink into the chair for 3 hours after the meal, just talking and talking and talking, or whether they need to live there because they're in transition, or whether they live there all the time because they are the caregivers. The people who need to live in that house need to be consulted when that house is built. So every kind of project, I don't care whether it's a theater production or it's urban planning or it's some sort of big, huge exhibition, you've got to make sure that all of the people who are going to experience it are present when you design it. And you really have to think about your lens, right? So an example would be, it's almost impossible, not completely, but almost impossible for a man to understand what it's like to be 8 months pregnant and you can't see your feet. And how frustrating it is because you suddenly can't tie your own shoes. It's very hard for them to understand that this simple act of turning to get a can of soup is now a 30 to 40 pound heavier act, right? That's an example. It's really simplistic, but it is an example of, it's not that we don't have amazing men. We do. We have amazing men who are very strong feminists. I'm very proud to say I'm the parent of a number of these young men, but that doesn't mean that they completely understand it in their body in an embodied kind of way. And there's different levels of understanding. So I depend on groups who can tell me what something feels like from their own embodied experience. I can think that I know what their life is like, but that doesn't mean that I've lived it. And that doesn't mean I felt it in my muscles and felt it in ripple on my skin and felt it, give me the little, hairs on the back of my neck. Those feelings are really important to pay attention to. It's this magical combination of gut, instinct, passion, and that's a mix that cannot be replicated. So we have to listen to each and every person.
Yeah, I think what that does is we humanize people whose stories we know and understand and that we feel, right? Mm-hmm. And we all need more the ability to humanize others, right? Oh, Sharon, where are you going with this?
Yeah, you are an incredible storyteller. So don't ever think that you're not amazing at it and other things. You mentioned the everything that goes into, or what you think should go into creating a story with the data, and I know for the folks that are listening, they don't really know one very important aspect of impact arts and your passion, and that is the braid that has been formed between Impact Arts Co-op, Powerhouse Impact Media Group, and Diva Training and Staffing Solutions, or Creative Collaboration, which is my company. And so I'm just wondering, because that is weaving in one of its finest forms, and I'm wondering if you can speak to why you feel so strongly that this is important for you, and what do you see being the biggest outcome of this braid? And maybe we can talk a little bit about what the power. Well, no, let's just go there and see what comes.
Okay, and then I want to hear Shara's thoughts on these too, as well as yours. I get a chance to talk to you a little bit more frequently. I think that we all have seasons in our life. And I think that inherently we recognize it. Some of us speak to it. We embrace it. We understand it. But I have lived the season of being a child. And I have lived the season of being a mother. And now I am approaching the third season of my life. My birthday is this coming Monday. And on my brain, on my mind a lot is, what does this mean? How can I live this next chapter in a way that I'm truly, truly fulfilling? So I think I mentioned that I am Jewish, and so we have a Hebrew word. It means tikkun olam. It means to make the world a better place. So now as I approach this next season, I'm trying to think about, all right, well, in many cultures, this is the season of the elder. In many cultures, this is the moment when the matriarch steps up. This is an important, valuable role in our society, and it's often marginalized. And like, I can remember the moment I went into a bar and sat down at the bar and realized that the men in the bar just like glanced right past me, like I didn't even exist, right? Because they, and I was like, oh, so that's what it feels like to get older, huh? You become invisible in culture in lots and lots of ways. And that's a new thing, this new, fetishizing youth and fetishizing innocence and naivety. It's the aging, the becoming the elder, becoming the matriarch. It's a privilege. It's an extraordinary privilege, because you're able to turn everything that was negative or questionable or scary or dark. You're able to like really look in all of those dark places and figure out some thoughts, some feelings, some answers, some more questions. And then you're able to share that wisdom with the young. Maybe they'll listen, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll listen after I'm long gone. Who knows? Like, I love biographies, so I tend to really focus in on what Eleanor Roosevelt did, for an example. And these are our stories. This is our moment now in this season. So braiding with Powerhouse and braiding with Creative Collaboration and your specific Diva project is what I see as the smartest, most efficient, most loving way to truly become the matriarch that I believe I am destined to be. And I don't believe that I am destined to be the one who's in front. My word for this year, we've talked about this, my leadership word for this year is sap. I believe that my role is to be the sap inside of the matriarchal tree, and that it's your job to be the fullest, roundest tree. And year after year after year, we will build rings. And year after year after year, we will become stronger, and we will nurture the mycelium network beneath the soil, and we will shelter those who need shelter underneath our branches. And I believe genuinely that you are organizations and people that I want to walk that walk with. And of course, a lot of that's just down to trust, right? And lifting it upstairs that somebody's, looking out, certainly for me, and I think for all of us, because we all have such unique, specific gifts, and braiding them together creates something really extraordinary.
Thank you for that, Miah. And I just have to say that I think the braiding is braiding for impact is something that you're one of the first people I think we met that, and we didn't have to explain that concept to you came to us knowing that and understanding it. And so maybe that's why we all get along so well. But that is beautiful that you what you just demonstrated. And I just want to thank you. And I think I'll just pass it to Tina.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, you know what? I concur. I remember first meeting you, Miah, and it was like walking into a cloud of possibility that just got bigger than my own cloud of possibility. And then I was like, what was that? Like, somebody just took my brain and went poof, even bigger. And it's exactly what you said, Sharon. It's like there was no explanation needed. There was no like, well, this is what weaving in, this is what braiding is. You're like, you're already there. In fact, you weren't just already there. You were taking me 8 steps further than I had language in my body for. So that's kind of where I'm not going to go here because that's all of the conversation. I want to pass to Shar, but I want to just name that if anyone's listening and they're not getting it, it's not that you don't get it in your body, likely. It's that there isn't a narrative in your head to make sense of what this is. And that's what Miah's work is all about. If you're just joining us, this is Gather for Her. We are a co-created conversation. We meet every 2 weeks here on LinkedIn, here on Facebook, and we have co-created conversations, emergent conversations with changemakers who are contributing to the world that we are co-creating together. This is Powerhouse Impact Media Group. You're talking to the Braid and to Miah Olmsted from Impact Arts Co-op. And I'm going to toss over to Shar, the founder of Powerhouse Impact Media Group, because it's like you are two birth mothers of beautiful work. And I would just love to hear what's on your heart in this moment, Shar.
Well, it's a very exciting conversation and a very exciting time. So I'll highlight a few key nuggets that really came through for me. The first is a very clear what. What are we talking about right now? We are talking about the power of data-backed storytelling through an Indigenous lens. That's what we're talking about. What might be possible. What might be possible in our decision making moving forward? What might be possible with where our attention and intention goes if we put more focus around shifting the narrative? And that narrative was actually backed by data that is very helpful for decision making. I want to touch on just for a moment around why now. So that's the what. Data-backed storytelling to shift the narrative. And what if those stories were told through an Indigenous lens? I believe that why now is important because it has, we're being called in 2021 and 2022 to remember our past more than ever before, to bring our ancestors. So I'm not here as Charlene Sinjenko. I am actually here with all of my ancestors, as are all of you. And who are they asking us to remember that we are? And not just remember, but feel, embody through an experience that can only be achieved when all of our senses come alive, far beyond where words will ever take us. The embodied change making that is needed now is palpable. What I loved with that's the past into the present is exactly what Christina said. Stories unite us. Stories help us to humanize each other. They are the connective tissue. Part of the reason we gather every week is to just understand our stories of who we are and why we're here and help build a bigger grid of united humans. And then finally, we also touched on the future and what is possible. What's the legacy we're leaving for the future? Whether they want to consider that story and leave that story, but this is the story of us. And like Christina said, there's amazing change makers doing gobsmacking awesome work, and no one knows about them beyond their walls and their board and their stakeholders, or artists who are doing drop dead amazing work. And it goes back, 20 years ago when I looked at a magazine cover with far too much Botox and far too much, And I looked at it and I said, who the hell are we celebrating? Who are we celebrating here? And that's why we're doing what we're doing, because it's time to celebrate those who can lift us up. And I'm so proud to walk beside you, Miah. I don't know where that takes you for some final thoughts, but I'm just so proud of what we're up to in the world, and where I'm excited to see where it goes next.
Yeah, I am too. There's no question about it. And I think that in business, just like in life, we are influenced by the 5 people that we spend the most time with. This is just a fact of life. So when we choose to surround ourselves with people who lift us up, who fill our cups, who nurture us, but who also allow us to nurture them, it has to be reciprocal, right? We need to have healthy boundaries. We need to have ebb and flow, and we need to exchange leadership. and following back and forth in this beautiful rhythm, right? Sometimes we're riding the wave and sometimes we're in the tow. It's just, it is what it is. And you asked me when I was coming on to talk about rituals, things that I do to keep myself calm when I can tell that the tow is coming. And I have to tell you that I'm a star therapist. I love star therapy. That is just laying on the ground and looking up at the stars. And if it's too cold, then I sit on a bench and I just look at the stars, because the stars are the things that remind me that what I'm looking at doesn't even exist anymore. And lots of those little pinpricks of light, they're not even there anymore. And yet I am feeling loved. I am feeling part of the cosmos. I am feeling connected to everything around me. And I am feeling the reality of my own humility. I'm just one tiny little speck in the world. And it isn't even a matter of just focusing on, this is the thing that I can change. I can't change other people. It's even more around, I'm not even sure sometimes if I can change myself. There's some habits that are like, I really wish I didn't have that habit. The habit of interrupting, for an example, right? It's just like, I work on it every day. But I can lie in the grass, I can sit in my winter coat on a bench, and I can look up at the sky and I can just realize this doesn't matter. This thing that I'm so agitated about, this doesn't matter, right? Will this make a difference 5 years from now? Will this make a difference 10 years from now? And if it doesn't, then I need to just let it go. And if it does, then I need to figure out, okay, what is it that I need to do? Who do I need to call for my lifeline? Right? I think that's where we are. And I think that what's happening here in the leader path is that that's what we're doing. We're surrounding ourselves with the people who lift us up so that we can become the best that we want to be, the best in our communities, in our families, the best in ourselves. And when I say best, I don't mean like that competitive, you're best and somebody else is not best. I mean potential. We have reached the potential that we already have inside of us. We can be our best selves, literally be our best selves.
One of the things that I hope that we talk about next week in our wisdom circle is, what is it? Because your words about star therapy, it's like, what's star therapy? And then I was like, oh, what is the place? And what I want everybody to think about is, what is that place that does that for you? What Miah just described, that place of humility and bliss and connection and love, where you're just like, I am so small and I am connected to everything. And it's that place of deep gratitude. And so that's what I hope we get to unpack a little bit. So that's what I hope that you'll come to the wisdom circle with when we unpack this. So that's an invitation for everyone listening.
So to pick up on Christina's invitation to join us in our wisdom circle next week, which doesn't happen on LinkedIn or in Facebook, it happens in a private Zoom chat. You just go to the little link as listed on your screen here, powerhouse.com, gather for her registration, and we'll send you that link. We're just moving into our last 4 minutes, and so I'm just going to reset the room a bit to close, and then move into some final words, if that feels good for everybody. Mm-hmm. If you've just joined us in our last 4 minutes, welcome to Gather for Her, our co-created conversation with changemakers, seekers, liminal leaders, however you self-identify, in the contribution that you feel called to give to the world in these times that we're in. That's what these conversations are all about, artists of impact. And we gather every 2 weeks here on LinkedIn and in Facebook to be in co-creation with you in the comments section. You'll notice here as we gather, we're also in practice of acknowledging where we live in the landscape of our ancestry, where we live in the landscape of our place, and the story that is all of that. And this is a safe place for you to be exploring that. Powerhouse is a house of leaders for global impact. And we are exploring all the definitions of leading here. So please join us. This conversation continues next week in a wisdom circle where we unpack it. Again, it's private. Join our audience here just to get to know us. And our next guest 2 weeks from now, when you come back to find us on LinkedIn, is Deb Alcaldino from Business for Social Good. Yippee! She's also on the leader path with us, which you're seeing here. Just come and check us out. And with that, I'm going to pass to you, Shar, for some closing words, or however you want to do that to close this conversation. Maybe back to Miah. I don't know what wants to emerge.
I'll just leave you with just 2 words, and one is heart open, mind blown. Okay, 4 words.
I'm grateful. Grateful. Thank you.
I am head and heart. Head and heart, connecting the two. That's what data and storytelling is all about.
I am warmed and grateful to be sitting at your fire, Miah.
Well, I am humbled and filled with awe. So I guess mine are 4 words too. Thank you. I've gotten as much out of this conversation as I hope I've shared, and thank you. I really appreciate that. So I really feel this has been a reciprocal moment for all of us, and genuinely thankful. Gratitude for that.
Thank you, Miah. If you're joining us on the chat, feel free to share what is alive for you right now, and we'll reach out to you too. We're listening. We're here listening.
Right.
So we'll see everyone next week in the Wisdom Circle by joining our audience, and we'll see you in 2 weeks here live on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Bye, everybody. We will see you very, very soon.
Bye, everyone.